So I want you to imagine walking into your local grocery store, right?
Okay.
You grab an apple off this meticulously stacked display, and you know the exact hour, not the week, not the day, but the exact hour that piece of fruit was actually picked.
Which is pretty much impossible in a normal store.
Exactly. I mean, we are so used to food just sort of magically appearing on shelves that we rarely, stop to think about the massive machinery required to get it there.
Oh, absolutely. The
We're
logistics are wild.
Right. We just see the final product. It's all polished and gleaming under those fluorescent lights. But today, we're doing a deep dive into the actual biological cost of that journey. Because the source material we're looking at today, it's this fascinating behind-the-scenes transcript exploring Oaks Farms and their retail outlet, Seed to Table in Florida.
Yeah, that operation is incredibly unique.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive is to unpack the massive chasm between truly fresh, nutrient-dense food and all the industrialized, nutrient-void food supply most of us rely on. Because every single hour that Apple spends on a truck, it is literally bleeding nutrition.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay.
That is the invisible toll of our modern supply chain, honestly.
Yeah.
When you look at how a place like Seed to Table operates, you realize just how dramatically different a localized food system is compared to the industrial standard. I mean, they are running this farm-to-shelf logistics operation within a 48-hour window.
48 hours? That's insane.
Right. To pull that off, they utilize two-a-day deliveries. So the morning trucks bring in, your non-farm pantry items, but the afternoon trucks, those are loaded with fresh produce that was pulled from the dirt that exact same morning.
Which completely upends the normal grocery model.
Oh, completely.
But the motivation behind that crazy sprint, and it isn't just about like offering a crispier piece of lettuce, right? It's about preserving what they call electric living energy.
Yes, electric living energy.
Yeah. But let's ground that concept a bit because, to be honest, it sounds a little bit like mystical marketing.
It does sound a bit woo-woo.
Yeah. So what is actually happening biologically to a vegetable the second it gets pulled out of the dirt?
Okay, so the moment a stem is severed or a root is pulled, the plant's biological imperative completely shifts. It goes from growing to just surviving.
Like a panic mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The primary pipeline for water and trace minerals is instantly gone. So the plant has to start consuming its own internal reserves just to keep its seeds viable.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah. The cellular structures start to slowly degrade, and the phytonutrients begin oxidizing. And the data on this is striking. The nutritional density, the living energy we were talking about, it drops by roughly half within just 1 to 2 days of harvest.
Wait. Half the nutrition is gone in 48 hours?
Literally half.
Yeah.
Just gone. And then it halves again 3 to 4 days after that. You are basically dealing with an exponential decay of vitamins and enzymes.
I'm thinking of this like a rechargeable battery, right?
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Well, like if you have a standard grocery store apple, it's like a battery that's been sitting in a drawer for a year. It physically looks fine. It looks like an apple, but the charge is totally gone.
Yep. Dead battery.
Because commercial apples can sit in climate-controlled storage for up to a year before you ever take a bite.
Right. They use chemical treatments and modified atmosphere packaging
Yeah.
just to halt the physical rotting process.
But the biological clock keeps ticking.
Exactly.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit. I want to challenge the premise.
Go for it.
If a localized operation in Florida can pull off a farm-to-shelf delivery in 48 hours, why can't the massive global conglomerates do it? I mean, they have billions of dollars. They have fleets of airplanes.
They have all the money in the world.
Right. So are you telling me they just choose not to?
They absolutely choose not to.
Really?
Yeah, because the industrial agriculture system just isn't designed for nutritional density. That's not the goal. It is optimized for scale, transportability, and shelf stability.
Okay, so it's about the logistics, not the food.
Exactly. I mean, think about moving soft, perfectly ripe fruit at a global scale. It results in massive shrinkage, which is industry speak for spoiled or crushed product. So to guarantee a return on investment, these massive conglomerates just have to prioritize durability over biology.
Right.
The sheer volume they move forces a completely different methodology out in the fields.
Because they're fighting that 48-hour decay window. They can't ship ripe fruit fast enough. So they basically just changed the definition of ripe.
Exactly. They invented a mechanical workaround.
And the tomato industry is like the perfect example of this compromise, right?
Sure.
From what I saw in the sources, most commercial tomatoes are picked what the industry calls stone green.
Stone green.
Yeah, like literally hard as rocks.
Well, you have to think about the physics of mass processing here. At an industrial scale, they throw these tomatoes into massive 40,000-pound transport tubs.
40,000 pounds.
Yeah. So if you put 40,000 pounds of soft, perfectly ripe red tomatoes into one single container,
The ones at the bottom are just crushed.
instant liquid paste,
Right.
just crushed by the sheer weight of the fruit above them.
Wow.
And then, after that, they have to run these green tomatoes across all these complex machine belts at high speeds to sort them by size. The machinery literally requires a hard, durable, almost baseball-like product just to survive the facility.
So they pick them green, sort them mechanically, ship them thousands of miles, and then, this is the crazy part, they hit them with ethylene gas
Yep, the gas room.
to artificially ripen them once they reach the distribution center. It's like pulling a cake out of the oven halfway through baking and just slapping frosting on it to make it look done.
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, it looks like a cake, but the inside is fundamentally unfinished. The gas just triggers the red color change on the outside, but the nutrient pipeline from the soil was cut weeks ago. You get the look of a tomato without the actual substance.
Right. And, the gas itself isn't necessarily dangerous, but the visual cues of freshness remain, while you, the consumer, are completely robbed of the nutritional density and the flavor.
Yeah, grocery store tomatoes always taste like water.
Exactly. You lose those complex flavor profiles that only develop during the final delicate stages of ripening on the vine.
So how does a place like Oaks Farms do it differently?
Well, contrast the industrial way with their hand-greeted approach. When a farm actually commits to vine-ripe tomatoes, machines are entirely out of the equation.
Just it's all manual.
Yeah, human beings have to physically walk the rows, gently handle the fruit, and make individual judgments by sight and feel.
Which has to be incredibly labor-intensive.
Unbelievably so.
Yeah.
And it puts the farmer entirely at the mercy of environmental volatility. Mother Nature dictates everything, literally up to the minute.
Oh, right, like that rain check phenomenon mentioned in the source.
Yes, the rain check.
This blew my mind. So if a farmer is letting a crop get perfectly red on the vine and the radar shows a heavy storm moving in, they are forced into an emergency harvest.
Because if heavy rain hits a fully ripe, delicate red tomato,
The skin splits open.
it literally splits right on the vine, and the whole crop is destroyed.
You are literally racing against the weather, hour by hour.
And racing against the crops themselves. The biological velocity of nature is astounding when you actually pay attention to it. During peak hot summer conditions, a squash can grow from the size of a quarter in the early morning.
Wait, a quarter?
Yeah, just the size of a coin. And by the late afternoon of that exact same day, it's full size and ready for harvest.
In one day.
In one day.
Right.
So managing that sheer speed of growth without relying on industrial shortcuts requires immense innovation, especially when it comes to things like pest control.
Right, because the conventional method for dealing with bugs, like whiteflies, is just to blanket the field in synthetic chemical pesticides.
Spray everything.
Yeah. But the farm, in our deep dive today, uses this really innovative alternative. They use highly reflective material laid out on the ground between the crops.
It's so smart.
I love the mechanics of this so much. Instead of a synthetic poison, they're literally using the physics of light.
Yeah, explain how that works for the listener, because it's fascinating.
So the reflective mulch bounces the intense Florida sunlight back up from the ground. And apparently, whiteflies rely on the contrast between the bright sky and the dark earth to navigate.
Right.
So when the ground is suddenly reflecting this blinding UV light back up at them, they become fundamentally disoriented. They literally can't figure out which way is up, so they can't land on the leaves to lay their eggs.
It's a physical, non-toxic deterrent.
It's brilliant.
And finding those non-toxic deterrents is so critical, because the way we have traditionally treated pests, and accelerated harvests, it's led directly to this cascading systemic failure in agriculture.
You mean the soil itself?
Yes. The physical soil our food grows in has been fundamentally altered. We're looking at a system where the earth itself is sick. I mean, look at what happened to the Florida citrus industry.
Oh, the citrus greening virus.
Exactly. It has absolutely decimated the industry.
Yeah.
And it's actually spread by those exact same whiteflies we were just talking about. Today, the Florida citrus industry is operating at roughly 15 to 20% of its previous capacity. It is a total collapse.
15 to 20% is apocalyptic for an agricultural sector.
It is.
But the sources point out that the virus didn't just spread because it was super contagious. It spread like wildfire because the orange trees were already deeply immunocompromised.
They're weak.
Right. They were growing in dirt that was completely devoid of foundational nutrition because of, decades of conventional farming relying on those NPK chemical fertilizers.
Yeah, let's unpack the biology of NPK for a second. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Conventional farming treats plants like they only need those three macronutrients to survive.
Which is crazy.
It's like feeding a human being a diet consisting strictly of protein powder, refined carbs, and processed fats.
With zero vitamins, minerals, or fiber.
Right. The human might grow physically large, but their immune system would be completely hollowed out. It's the same with the plant. It looks green, it grows tall, produces fruit, but it completely lacks the dozens of complex trace minerals required to synthesize the compounds that actually defend against pathogens.
And then you add heavy glyphosate use into that mix, and you've got a recipe for disaster.
Oh, glyphosate is the nail in the coffin.
Because it's a systemic herbicide, right? It doesn't just kill the weeds on the surface.
Yeah.
When it saturates the dirt, it acts like a broad-spectrum antibiotic for the soil microbiome.
Exactly. It wipes out all the invisible beneficial bacteria and fungi that live on the plant's roots. And without that microscopic ecosystem, the roots literally cannot absorb whatever trace minerals might actually be left in the ground.
It just sterilizes the dirt.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So to fix a vulnerability that deep, you can't just spray a new chemical. You have to manufacture an entirely new ecosystem.
Right.
In the video, they talk about this 170-acre orange grove project. And the solution involved two massive steps. First, they physically isolated the young trees by covering them in massive white nets.
To block the whiteflies.
Right, to stop the disease-carrying flies from ever touching the leaves. But second, and honestly more importantly, they completely rebuilt the soil biome from scratch.
Yeah, this part was wild.
They trucked in 600 tons of slightly dried chicken manure from North Florida.
600 tons.
Yeah.
And they dry it just enough so it doesn't, smell catastrophic, but it still retains all that crucial microbial activity.
Right, it's alive.
And then they blend that manure with massive amounts of composted pine bark mulch, and they let it cure for a year and a half before spreading it around the trees.
18 months just sitting there.
They are basically reintroducing living bacteria and organic matter back into dead sand.
And this highlights such a profound parallel between modern conventional farming and modern medicine.
All right, how so?
Well, many conventional farmers treat university agricultural guidelines as absolute gospel, and those guidelines heavily promote chemical inputs and GMO seeds.
Right.
It is incredibly similar to a medical model that heavily prescribes pharmaceuticals to manage isolated symptoms, like taking a pill to lower your blood pressure, without ever addressing the foundational lifestyle and dietary causes of the illness.
So both systems are just slapping a Band-Aid on it. They treat surface-level symptoms rather than cultivating deep foundational health.
Precisely.
Okay, but let's look at the harsh economic reality of this for a second.
Okay.
If rebuilding the soil biome creates naturally disease-resistant crops and vastly superior fruit, why aren't all conventional farmers immediately pivoting?
Well,
Are they just stubbornly stuck in the old ways? Because sourcing 600 tons of specialized manure, paying for intense manual labor to hand-sort tomatoes, and waiting 18 months for pine bark to compost, that requires astronomical upfront capital.
it does.
So are conventional farmers just locked in a financial trap where they simply can't afford to stop using cheap chemicals?
That financial barrier is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head. Achieving this level of agricultural purity requires immense buying power and a consumer base willing to pay the true cost of production.
Right.
For a conventional farmer operating on razor-thin margins, pivoting to organic, regenerative soil practices is a terrifying financial risk. During that multi-year transition period, while the dead soil slowly heals, yields temporarily drop.
And a farmer could easily go bankrupt in that time.
Exactly. The current economic structure of heavily subsidized, artificially cheap food effectively locks them into the chemical cycle.
And the tragic part is that chemical cycle doesn't stop at the edge of the farm.
No, it does not.
When the soil is sick, the plants are sick. And when the plants are sick, the downstream biological effect hits the animals that eat them. And ultimately, it slams right into human biology.
We absorb all of that deficit.
Right. There is a direct mechanistic line between this soil depletion and the modern human obesity epidemic. We are basically living in an era of nutrient-void food.
It is a cruel biological irony, really. You can consume a meal that contains 2,000 calories, like massive amounts of raw energy. But because the ingredients were grown in depleted soil, that meal is entirely devoid of the essential micronutrients, minerals, and amino acids your body requires for basic cellular function.
So you get the calories, but none of the actual fuel.
Right. Your digestive system processes the bulk, but your cells remain malnourished.
So your stomach is physically stretched full from, like, a massive fast food meal, but your cells are screaming, we still need magnesium, we need zinc.
Yes.
It's like being stranded in the middle of the ocean and drinking salt water. You keep gulping it down, your stomach is physically full and sloshing around, but you are literally dying of thirst.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Because the human brain doesn't know how to signal, eat more magnesium, it just hits the global feed me button. So you go back to the pantry, eat more empty calories, and become trapped in this vicious cycle of endless overconsumption.
And that physiological drive to acquire missing nutrients completely overrides the physical sensation of a full stomach. And you have to consider the hidden costs of what we have accepted as cheap food over the years.
Right, like fast food.
Exactly. Look at the evolution of the fast food hamburger. 40 years ago, a standard fast food burger was generally made from straightforward whole beef.
Actual meat.
Right. Today, conventional fast food relies on a complex web of highly processed, subsidized ingredients. We see the inclusion of meat fillers, like pink slime, genetically modified wheat, and numerous synthetic preservatives that extend shelf life but offer absolute zero biological value.
But kids eat it all the time and seem fine.
While young metabolism can seemingly process this, sure, but the biological debt accumulates, and it eventually presents as chronic diet-induced illness later in life.
And a massive portion of that biological debt comes directly from how we raise the animals we consume.
Oh, entirely.
Look at the difference in cattle farming.
Yeah.
Standard conventional cows are fed diets extremely heavy in genetically modified corn and soy.
Which is completely unnatural for them.
Right. A cow's digestive system, its rumen, is biologically evolved to ferment complex grasses, not to process high-starch grains.
No, feeding them corn makes their digestive tract highly acidic and creates systemic inflammation.
But it allows a cow to unnaturally pack on 250 to 300 pounds in a single year. Speed equals profit.
Speed over health. But when you contrast that with grass-finished cattle, the timeline changes entirely.
Because they're eating what they're supposed to eat.
Right. When cows eat their natural, biologically appropriate diet of varied pasture grasses, they grow at a much slower natural pace. It takes roughly 2.5 years for a grass-finished cow to reach maturity.
Wow, compared to 1 year.
Exactly. And this requires vastly more land, more water, and significantly more time, which undeniably increases the price at the butcher counter.
It hits the wallet.
It does. But the resulting meat has a vastly superior fatty acid profile, higher levels of vitamins, and lacks the inflammatory markers associated with grain-heavy feedlots.
And you see this exact same attention to biological design with poultry, too.
Oh, the chickens?
Yeah, a localized regenerative farm can run a completely closed-loop system. Instead of buying massive silos of standard grain feed, a farm with a produce packing house can utilize its own waste.
Right.
So they feed free-roaming chickens the premium romaine lettuce trimmings and perfectly ripe strawberries that maybe got a little bruised and couldn't be sold to the grocery store.
That's amazing.
Right. The waste of one process becomes premium nutrient-dense fuel for another. And the result is eggs so fresh that they are collected while still sitting at 95 to 98 degrees.
Still warm from the hen.
Exactly. You literally cannot get a fresher protein source.
But, we have to acknowledge a practical reality here.
Sure.
Most of us do not have a closed-loop regenerative farm in our backyard.
Sadly, no.
We live in a modern, compromised environment. We are surrounded by nutrient-void food, and even if we eat well, our digestive systems are often so inflamed from environmental stressors that we can't properly absorb the nutrients we do consume.
That's a great point.
Because of this, many people are turning to specific biohacking tools designed to maximize cellular absorption and repair that damage.
Exactly. If our food supply is compromised, how do we maximize the absorption of what little we get? And one of the tools getting a lot of traction in the sources is hydrogen water, specifically using generators like the Echo H2O.
Which, again, sounds a bit out there.
Now, infusing water with hydrogen definitely sounds like a gimmick until you look at the mechanism.
Right, the science behind it.
Because molecular hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe. And because it's so small, it easily passes right through our cell membranes.
Oh, wow.
Once inside, it acts like a highly targeted microscopic sponge. It specifically neutralizes harmful inflammatory free radicals in the gut without disrupting the beneficial processes.
So it lowers inflammation.
Exactly. By lowering that systemic inflammation, it makes your gut lining much more capable of actually absorbing the vitamins in your food.
So it basically creates a more hospitable environment for nutrient uptake.
Right.
And the second tool they mentioned addresses the sheer energetic cost of protein synthesis. When you consume standard protein sources, your body has to expend a massive amount of energy breaking those complex proteins down into individual amino acids before it can use them to build muscle or repair tissue.
That's a lot of work for the digestive system.
Exactly. And in many commercial protein powders, the actual absorption rate can be shockingly low.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But full-spectrum amino acid supplements like Perfect Amino bypass that complex digestive breakdown entirely. Because they are already broken down into the precise essential building blocks the body needs, they boast an absorption rate close to 99%.
99%.
Yeah, they go straight into cellular repair without introducing excess calories or digestive strain.
So we have mapped an incredible journey today.
We really have.
We started with the 48-hour race against the decay of living energy. We looked at the mechanical fictions of green tomatoes and ethylene gas. We dug into the ruined microbiome of the soil and traced it all the way to our own inflamed digestive tracts and the tools we use to cope.
It's all connected. And if we synthesize everything we've explored, the ultimate takeaway is really a paradigm shift in how we view wellness.
Yeah.
True human health does not originate in a high-tech gym, and it certainly doesn't begin in a pharmacy aisle. It fundamentally starts in the dirt. We've seen exactly how the pressures of logistics, the mechanics of mass processing, and a heavy reliance on chemical shortcuts systematically hollow out our food supply.
They really do.
But returning to nutrient-dense farming practices, whether it's cultivating vine-ripened tomatoes by hand, rebuilding soil with compost, or investing in grass-finished beef, it isn't just a culinary luxury. It is the most foundational form of preventative medicine available to us.
It really is the ultimate upstream solution. And I want to leave you, the listener, with the final thought to mull over the next time you are standing in the grocery store aisles. We so often complain about the premium price of truly organic, grass-finished, regenerative food. It hits the wallet hard.
It definitely does.
But when we look at the skyrocketing rates of chronic diet-induced illness and we consider the massive volume of empty calories we are forced to consume just to get a fraction of the nutrients our bodies are screaming for, what is the actual price we're paying for cheap food? Are we simply saving a few dollars at the register today only to be forced to pay the massive compounding balance with our own biology tomorrow?
That's the real question.
The next time you pick up an apple, ask yourself how much living energy is really left inside.